All right. So I wanted to go over some quick techniques and some ideas for you today. When you start to tackle painting your first Who Am I sculpture, okay? So um, they should be fired. Here's my example, right? So it came out of the kiln. First of all, I just wanted to kind of talk about this piece right here. So this is actually not considered clay anymore. This has been chemically changed and it's now called ceramic, right? So I think we talked about that. But after it goes through the firing process, we can't change the shape anymore. The shape is locked in and this will be the shape forever, right? So until whatever. That's why we dig up pieces of pottery that are thousands of years old that hold their shape. So this is the shape. We can't recycle this anymore, right? And so we're going to start our painting today. And so I'm going to go over, like I said, a few techniques for you, a few things to think about, and then you'll have some time to tackle adding color to your surface. Okay, so I wanted to point out some of the materials that are going to be helpful for you. First of all, we have a paint palette. Again, these are located by the sinks. You'll notice here I got some colors already, some white, blue, yellow, red, and brown. Look how much I got. I really did not take a lot. I can always go take more, but please be cautious with that. If I take too much out, I'm just going to be really wasteful. And so take a little bit of paint. Your sculptures aren't that big. And I can always get more later when I need that. I also have collected some water, right? So I have some water and some paintbrushes that I'll be using. And I also have some paper towels, right? So those are kind of the materials that I have. I also have this example of a sculpture that was painted with acrylic paint. And so just kind of some nice elements to this piece. There's a lot of blended colors, a lot of layering of colors, a lot of different colors. And so this piece, this student did a really nice job creating some realistic sort of color blending, some nice kind of color variation here, but also the colors that really pop out and are really quite a nice piece, okay? So the key is that the student actually watered down some of the paint so that some of this textural quality doesn't get covered up, okay? So if we were just to take this thick paint and put it on our sculpture, a lot of those fine details that you created will get buried beneath the paint. The paint, I know we think it doesn't have a lot of thickness, but it can get pretty thick and cover up some of that texture, okay? So we're gonna be watering down our paint and thinning it down so that that textural quality comes through, okay? So I am just gonna get going here. The nice thing is when I do water down the paint, I can always paint over it, okay? So I'm gonna just get my brush nice and wet, all right? I'm gonna use this part to mix some of that color. So I'm gonna bring some of that white in there as my base color. A little bit more water, maybe I'm gonna grab some yellow. And I'm kinda gonna go for a skin tone here. All right, so for skin tone, I use a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red. All right, but it's primarily white, and then I'll maybe get a little bit of brown in there too. Ooh, that's a lot of brown. So I'm getting kind of a peachy tone, a little bit of blue in there. Okay, so mix all those nicely together. Okay, and this is even too thick, so I want to really water that down.
5 minutes later.
Okay, so here I have a tone that I have kind of kept mixing for a little while and playing around with that I think is a little bit nicer. So I'll kind of dab some over here, and again, water that down, okay? And then I'm just gonna start slapping it on here, okay? So what I'm really thinking about is just getting a first layer down. And again, what I want is to not have very thick paint. Okay, so I'm gonna try to thin this down as much as I can. Where the paint gets too thick, again, all those details that I did, all those textural qualities, they kind of get erased. So I'm gonna try to thin this out as much as I can. I can even add water into that area, thin that paint out even more. Okay, so it's gonna start stretching that paint and extending that paint. Okay. So thin out your paint. That's kind of the key message here today, okay? Don't make your paint too thick, okay? So a little bit more paint. And again, that paint will just kind of keep coming out of my brush as long as I keep adding some water to it, okay? But I'm gonna try to thin that out, thin that out, thin that out. Okay? Again, I'm gonna just kind of keep going here. I'm not gonna paint this whole thing for you today in this video, but I might throw this base layer down, okay? So let's throw this base layer down. Now, let's just kind of assume maybe I put that down and I really don't like it, right? Maybe as it dries, it's changing color a little bit. I don't love it. All right, the nice thing about, again, having this really thin paint, I can go back with a different color. Maybe I want to go back with just some white and see how that looks. Okay, so thin down some white, kind of come back in here. Maybe I'm going to do some blending right onto my sculpture and see how that looks. Right, so get maybe a more dry brush with less water. I'm going to just start like blending some of that white into the surface, soft here, so I can kind of get some of those tones blended in. Now that's a tone that I like a little bit more. Okay, so I don't know if we can see that, but it's kind of lightened up a little bit, and I like that. Maybe I want to think about shadows. I want to think about where the darker spots would be. Maybe I want to think about where the lighter spots would be. Okay, so maybe under the eyes I want to have a little bit darker. I'm going to blend that in a little bit. Okay, but again, the nice thing, again, nothing is permanent here, right? So I can kind of play around with some of these colors. Now, nothing says this has to be realistic. You can do unrealistic colors. That's absolutely okay. But what I'm looking for here is that the details of your clay work don't get lost. Okay, so make sure that you still are able to see texture. Make sure that you're still able to see all that great detail that you achieved in your first in your sculpting stages. Okay, so those are some of the things I wanted to point out to you today. In a second here, I'm going to clean up my brushes and show you what my expectation is for cleaning. And so I'm going to cut that in next. But have some fun with that and enjoy that process. I'm also going to maybe a little bit later show a technique of how we can maybe add some different sort of color techniques here, some color pencils, maybe some markers, chalk pastels, and things like that. Okay, I'm here at the sink and I wanted to just show you how I want to clean up this paint. Okay, so first of all, I have my bucket of water and brushes. So first of all, literally just running your brushes through the water, that's going to get them mostly clean. Okay, but then I can just dump out that water. I am going to run this under the sink. Okay, please make sure all these brushes have no paint in them. If any paint gets left in these, they do dry. The brushes I have to throw away, okay? So I test that just in my fingers. If any paint comes out, then I know I need to wash it again. These go back where you found them in the brush drying rack, okay? Now this, again, we don't want any paint kind of on these. So watch your angles. I don't need to turn the water on very high. I actually want it on very low. And just use your finger. All right, all this paint should kind of be flowing off your palette. And once I keep moving it in all the areas and no more paint is coming off, okay, this is now a clean palette. Okay, so that's a clean palette that can go back in the drying rack. Okay, and then we want to make sure that there's no paint left over in the sink. So if there is some paint, we want to just clean that off, grab a paper towel, wipe down the sink, and then that's a good way for our cleaning of our acrylic paint.